And that's when I realized that it really came down to me being able to either afford the college or whether they'll help me get to a point where I can fund my previous, years of tuition and things like that.
Hey guys, welcome to the College Lead YouTube channel where I interview current students and recent graduates of different colleges across the US to give you a broader perspective of how college admissions and life works. So today we have a very special guest, Nuzhat. She is an international student and she also studies computing and information sciences. Nuzhat, could you tell us a little bit about yourself just to get started?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen, for the nice welcome. So I'm an international student from Bangladesh, and I grew up in the capital city of Dhaka. And I came to the US 2 years ago to pursue computing and information sciences. Initially, I was a CS major, but I wanted to dive into something more broad. So I switched into a major that's basically if CS and IT had a baby. So to go with that, what really piqued my interest was computing security. So that's kind of what I focus a lot of my academic and career path in, computing security, and my minor is criminal justice. So I kind of combine all these aspects of finding ways on how to help people in developing countries based on lack of computing security resources. And before college, I've always been an artist by hobby. So I had a natural aptitude for design, and I realized that in technology is very important to implement design in terms of user experience for any system there is. So on the side, I'm always working on projects that implement UI UX design and then website development. So yeah, that's a little gist of the things I work with.
That is amazing. You do a ton. And I can also say that Nuzhat is an amazing website designer. She helps me revamp the College Lead website. So props to her. But let's go back in time a little bit. Could you tell me about what you did in high school to prepare for college in the US specifically?
So I was one of the students that had the chance in Bangladesh to go to a school that actually prepares you in some way to apply to universities abroad. So I went to a school called Sunbeams in Bangladesh, which is one of the oldest schools there ever since Bangladesh was liberated in 1971. And so, yeah, my country is relatively new, and the school has a really good reputation. And I know that my parents made sure that I had the chance to attend. So this school is not just like, how you have middle school and high school. This went all the way from kindergarten to not even kindergarten, preschool all the way till 12th grade. So one thing is that Bangladesh, in Bangladesh you can choose to be under the national curriculum where all the instructions in Bengali, which is the native language that we speak in, or English, and that would be under the British education system because Bangladesh is a Commonwealth country, right? So the school I went to, all the exams, all the instructions and everything were within the British examination board. So the school I went to, they made sure that we kind of prepare for colleges abroad since it's so different from our country where you have to take an admission exam to get into universities versus in the US where they care about your ECAs, your grades from 8th grade, your transcripts, and your recommendation letters. So one thing that I really struggled with is that I couldn't think of anything that I wanted to include in my college application. And the reason why I say that is because I've been playing basketball since I was in 6th grade. And that was a big deal to me in Bangladesh simply because girls are not expected to take part in sports in our community. And I went out of my way to do it. I used to spend time at school, after school, and then I tried out for nationals. And I was recruited for the first under 18 team of the country, like the national Bangladesh team. And so for me, that was more of a passion, right? And when university counselors said that you include something that you want to, show off in your college application, I guess part of our culture is focusing on academics so much that I didn't even think that was important. So when I was applying, going through the entire process of having to include basketball, as well as I was really into public speaking, and I got into Model United Nations, where it's kind of similar to debate, except in debate competitions, you represent, say, an argument or a side or a perspective, but at a Model UN, you represent a country, whether or not you resonate with their policies, but you're assigned a country in a committee that deals with, say, a very specific problem, such as, health or security, weaponry, disarmament, and then you learn how to take on policies and defend them and make decisions. So that really helped me communicate and take on some leadership skills. And lastly, one of the biggest things on my own was art. I've been drawing ever since I could hold a pencil. So I never went to like an art school. I went to, we had like art classes at school, but other than that, I've never been to an art school or taken any external art classes. So I've just been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil, and that became so big that it ended up in a place where I kind of went against everything around me, in the sense that in our society, it's difficult to pursue art simply because of so many religious misinterpretations. Like they might not even be real, but at the same time, it's just things that generationally people believe. And art is one of those things, within our culture. And I pursued that, and I was able to host a lot of exhibitions of my own. I was able to host 4 exhibitions, and then, so these are the 3 main ECAs that I had that I was really passionate about. And that's when my college counselors told me that that's exactly what colleges look for. They want to know what you really care about, that you'd go out of your way to pursue them. And I said that, but these are not related to my major. I want to pursue tech because Bangladesh doesn't have tech. I want to pursue computer science because I don't have any coding experience. I want to know how I can change my society with tech. And they were like, that's okay, because they want to look for a person who cares about things rather than just doing things for the sake of a career or academics. So I guess when I started filling out my applications, I really resonated with the US application process, simply because for UK, Canada, Australia, it was simply about what grades you have. And for the US, they really cared about what kind of essay you write, what recommendations you have, what your teachers think about you, what your peers think about you. And I had a chance to express myself through my application, and I felt less bad about talking about my passions and using them to get somewhere, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of what the college application process was like for me. And I guess I was really lucky to go to a school that really supported me through those things.
Mm-hmm. I think it's amazing, all the work that you've done and how you really pursued your passions. You talked a lot about how, at least within the culture of where you grew up, art was a little difficult to break into. So how did you find the, courage to really pursue your passions when it wasn't, it seems like, a main focus of the education system where you grew up?
Right. And it was hard because I know that my school gave us that environment where it didn't matter if you're a girl or a guy, you're expected to partake in sports. And the minute I stepped out of my school, my society was very different. And that came to me as a shock. So that was one source of my courage, that if my school, if people within my school are so encouraging of me pursuing sports, because the main issue was, girls shouldn't be wearing shorts, girls shouldn't be doing what's deemed as masculine and things like that. So to me, those arguments were very flawed and oppressive. And I guess my school really gave us that courage, that it doesn't matter what barriers you face, you just push through to kind of thrive for things that you enjoy and you're achieving things in. And obviously couldn't have done it without the support of my coach and my teammates. That was for basketball. But when it came to art, that was definitely a bigger shock in the sense that everybody in the family would always be like, oh, you're going to grow up to be an artist, you know, you're doing so great. And the minute you start putting out your artworks into the real world and you see that, you know, like your society just not accepting you in a certain way and just being like, oh, that's a bad thing for you to partake in, whether it be self-proclaimed religious scholars or, you know, people who are just like, oh, don't let your daughter become an artist, she'll be hungry on the streets, all these little aspects of being an artist. That was difficult, but I know that I just pushed through those things, and it definitely was a difficult conversation with people I cared about. But when they saw that this is not affecting, say, my academics and or like my way of life, and I'm just going out there doing things I love. And I was also a very stubborn individual. I will add that. I was always angry. I was always just ready to do things that I was told not to. I was doing those things. But one thing that I really struggled with was the fact that when it came to, you know, choosing what I want to do in the future in terms of my academics, I didn't want to pursue art because I was afraid that if I pursued that as my major, that would become my source of stress rather than my stress relief. And for basketball, I know that, you know, here college tournaments are a huge thing, college teams. And I was worried that would take away my learning experience in the US because I would be so invested in sports. So I'm kind of one of those people, I enjoy the best of all worlds. And that's why I knew that I also want to do something for my community, and I recognize technology as the solution. And that's the path that I chose for my academics and career. So here I am.
Such an inspiring story. My next question is going to be more so about the process of applying to schools abroad. You mentioned that you applied to schools, or considered at least schools in the US, in Australia, in the UK, maybe even Canada. Could you tell me or walk me through what that process was like for you?
Like my passion for art, basketball, public speaking meant so much to me that I couldn't, you know, imagine going to a place that doesn't care about who I am as a person. So that's when I decided to apply to US colleges, and those are the only colleges I ended up applying to. So I didn't really walk through the entire process of applying to Canada or UK, but all my friends did. So for the US, considering I'm an international student, and at the time, getting a visa, like a student visa, was very difficult. I know some of the best students in my class couldn't pursue an education in the US simply because they couldn't get a visa. And so my family didn't want to risk applying with me, like just to even drop me off to college. So I was applying alone, and my parents thought that if you're going to go alone, we would rather have you be near some form of community. And since New York is kind of the place where there are big communities from, you know, diverse backgrounds, that's where my parents really wanted me to apply. And yeah, so that's when I Googled best computer science departments in New York. And so I came across Columbia, Cornell, NYU, NYIT, RIT, University of Rochester, Colgate. But I was heartbroken to find out that all of those, like most of those universities, along with the SATs or ACTs, required more subject tests. And for me, I didn't have enough time to take them and then apply. Or even if I did, it was a lengthy process. It just became a lengthy process for me simply because I was doing so much at the time. So what I did was I just shortlisted the colleges from that where they didn't require me to take the SAT subject tests. I did take the SATs. So yeah, I ended up applying to 6 colleges, and I got into 4 out of them. And that's when I realized that it really came down to me being able to either afford the college or whether they'll help me get to a point where I can fund my previous, like, you know, years of tuition and things like that. So, and as you know, for international students, the fees are almost double. And And also, we don't qualify for financial aid from the government. If the college itself has financial aid resources, they can give it to you. But the ones I applied to, considering New York is expensive as well, it was a difficult process. So my decision didn't come down to, oh, which high rank university I got into, but also which one will give me the best resources and value for the amount of money I'll be spending, and if I can realistically afford it. Because even if you're filthy rich in Bangladesh, you have to remember that you're converting a whole currency. Like $1 is like 84 in my currency, and that's a lot. So it was really about making that decision and how much scholarship I had, like that entire cost benefit analysis. And yeah, that was the process. And that's when I stumbled upon RIT, where they not only gave me a scholarship, but they recognized that beyond the scholarship, I still had higher living costs, and they can't give me financial aid for that because I'm an international student. And that's when they kind of helped me plan for how I'll be able to afford my college tuition upcoming, because I really didn't want to think about that, after I get here. And the fact that other colleges were simply like, congratulations, here's an acceptance. Whereas RIT was like, when you come, you can apply for these jobs on campus, or you can go on co-op, which is required for our program. You have to do an internship before you graduate, and those usually help you fund your upcoming semesters. So they really had it ready as to how to support their students. And yeah, that was my US application process experience.
I love how supportive RIT was in this process, especially financially. You mentioned how they have a scholarship. So how did you, or let me rephrase the question, what scholarship and financial aid options are available for international students, and how can they learn about these?
So it was difficult knowing what scholarships are available. A lot of times there are a lot of external scholarships that are available that colleges just route through. For example, if you tick certain boxes that you're a basketball player, or you took these certain subjects in high school and you're pursuing this field. So there are a lot of external scholarships that they route and they present to you, but the one I got was from the college itself. It was called the International Founders Scholarship, and I think RIT has 2 scholarships that are available to students. The maximum amount for that is $30,000 at the moment, but I know that every year they increase that. But that is a certain amount of money that is very significantly, contributing to the entire tuition, which is generally like $60,000. So the calculation that went in was typically on co-op, students at RIT earn about, say, $10,000 to $20,000 in a span of, say, 3 to 6 months. And that's typically how much you pay for a semester or a year, depending on how much you got in scholarship. So it was really about having that calculation. But definitely it was, for me personally, I'm very candid about this, it was still too expensive. And that's when I decided to take a gap year. I enrolled to RIT because I was still afraid. Like, I will admit that even looking back, I wasn't still entirely convinced. And also because University of Rochester, which is our neighboring university, 15 minutes drive, although the CS department of RIT was ranked higher, the overall ranking of University of Rochester was higher, and I guess that meant a lot to my family. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll wait. And at the time, I wasn't aware of all the resources that were available at RIT. So I was waiting to hear back from their financial aid office. And so I was like, but you know what, I don't want to lose my opportunity at RIT. So I enrolled and deferred my admission by 1 year. And in that 1 year, I got the offer to be an art teacher at the school I graduated from, simply because I was really lucky to have a principal and a managing director at the school who really believe in changing the education system in Bangladesh. And they were like, we don't appreciate that all our kids have been drawing the same thing for the past 10 years. We want to change that. We want parents to know how much value this really adds. And yeah, so for a year, at first I was an intern, and then I joined as a full-time art teacher at the school. And that really helped me, like in the meanwhile, really helped me plan for my college. So yeah, that's kind of the planning that went into it. But at the same time, as an international student, it's always a leap of faith, because like you asked, the scholarships that are available aren't always made clear as to, this is exactly what you can apply for. Rather, it's given to you, and then once you come to the college, you find out, oh, these are the resources that I could have applied for. And that's what's hard for international students. You can't just call them up, because each call will probably cost you like 1,000 in our currency, right? So yeah.
Yeah, but I think at least naming a few of those resources that you mentioned and how supportive RIT is, this will definitely help a lot of viewers that I have who are international students, because I know it's a huge concern. And obviously it looks like with enough planning, there is a way that you can still get an education in the US and still be as successful as you are with all of the work that you do.
Yeah, because it's important to consider that it's not just RIT, because I know that I got lucky with the fact that RIT really requires us to have 2 internships before we graduate, because since it's a tech school, they really focus on you having that work experience before you graduate, so that as soon as you do graduate, you have work experience and you can just get into the work industry, right? So, but on the sidelines, that really helps me finance my tuition, without being entirely reliant on a scholarship, which is often the case for most international students. And just kind of the way that I went around it was, if I lived in New York City, my cost would be twice as much, right, as compared to how it is in Rochester. So I know as an international student, we tend to go for areas that we're familiar with, and that's essentially what my parents advised me to do. But it's important to go out for resources that we're not familiar with. And like I mentioned, there are many external scholarships that you can apply for. Like, for example, once you come to RIT, I found out that they have scholarships that are simply for students who are from diverse backgrounds and not, don't hold like, say an American passport, or need other forms of support and are doing academically well, or have contributed to their communities or to the RIT community. So there are so many of these external scholarships that I know these are smaller in amount as compared to what your college gives you, but it's still important to keep searching for those. Some of them might not even be related to your college. Some of them might be interested in you as a person and what you're going to contribute if you are going to college. So, but from my end, what was really important was that after I came here, I picked the jobs on campus simply because as an international student, other than that 1 year of specified 365 days of work that I can do under my internships allocated from my student visa, other than that, I can't work or I'll get deported. So, but I can work on campus. So I handpicked the jobs on campus that would really lower my costs. And I think that's really important because most of us tend to just take the first campus job you can find. But I went for the web dev job at a multicultural organization on campus that helps international students. So that really resonated with my cause, and they were paying well. And it wasn't clashing with my classes. And then I taught, I facilitated 2 courses, and that was also stipend pay. And then I became a resident advisor, which means that my housing and food costs are covered. So these are some of the ways in which you can really plan out and afford. Maybe I wouldn't realistically say that, it was easy to afford even after all of this, simply because the exchange rate is so high, but it made the process more realistic, if that makes sense.
I love how you bring out all these other options, because I know that's something that even for myself as a student, I did have to take out student loans, but as a student in the US, I didn't really think about, oh, campus jobs, planning out this and planning out that and allocating. But I love how you bring in sort of, there are more options other than scholarships and financial aid. Granted, it's still going to be tough, but it's very much possible. One question that I wanted to ask earlier that I forgot was, for international admissions in US colleges, how important are test scores? You mentioned that ECAs or extracurricular activities are important, but how about test scores? How much would you say they matter?
So, for example, since I was under the British Examination Board, my scores somehow were from that examination system was less important when it came to like, comparing against the SAT scores. So when I applied to RIT, they cared about my math score. And I know simply because I scored higher in the math. I think I got a 720 out of 800. And I only took the SATs once. I know that for me, I really like throughout my application, the entire time I took the focus away from my test scores simply because I wanted them to know me for my achievements and what I can contribute to the university other than just my academics. But definitely as a threshold, like they just want to know that you qualify, like you're not at a GPA 1. And even if you are, what are some ways in which you can make up for that? Like, for example, if your SAT score was low, like as an international student, and you took, say, the TOEFL or IELTS, which are other English examinations that you have to take to qualify, and if you score higher in them, maybe that'll compensate for your other test score. So it's really important to remember what the threshold is. And then if you're very academically focused that, okay, you want to go right in and, study and contribute to research fields, maybe those will be important. But I guess in the tech field, for me, my only displaying that, I'm proficient in the sciences and math, that was more important than anything else, really. But I guess it would be drastically different if I was applying to, say, biomedical or other engineering fields, I guess, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You alluded to a threshold earlier. So how do you know what the threshold is for what a good SAT score means or what a good TOEFL score is?
Oh, that is just Google. Like, I think when you go on all the resources of typically what students who got hired for that university, not hired, who got into those colleges, I think it's a lot of data that's available to you as to what SAT scores students in the past had, and you can either match that or go a little higher. I think that's really helpful.
If you guys found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and also subscribe for more content like this.